Hey guys, today we're going to be making a ball pit simulation using the Molecular Script add-on. It's going to look something like this. Let's get started straight away. So open up Blender and just make this wide enough so that you can see all these buttons at the top. And also open up your internet browser because we want to download the Molecular Script. So you can Google PyroEvil Molecular Script and download it from his website. So go to Scripts, Add-ons, Molecular Script, Download, and download the appropriate version for your system. So I'm going to download this one for Mac OS X. Bear in mind that multi-threading might not work, so you might have to set the number of threads to 1, but we'll get to that in a second. Now it's downloaded here. For some reason, Safari has downloaded it and unzipped it straight away, but we want the zip file. So if you're on a Mac, you can right-click and compress Molecular, and this will make a zip file. If you were using Windows, you shouldn't have had that problem. So now that you've downloaded it, move it to a location you're going to remember, and go back to Blender, go to File, User Preferences, Add-ons, and Install from File. Now navigate to the place where you downloaded it, and click Install from File on the zip. Now you should get this tab which says Object Molecular Script, and you can read more about it. Check this box to start using it, and save user settings if you want to use it in the future. Now what you'll notice is if you go to the Particle Settings tab, there's a new heading here that says Molecular Script, and that's what we're going to use. Now we're going to make a very simple ball pit scene, and you can see exactly what I'm doing in the bottom left corner there with screencast keys. We're going to grab the cube with G in the Z axis by pressing Z, 1 by pressing 1. And now you can see it's floating just above the ground. Now we go to edit mode with tab and scale it, locking the Z axis by pressing S and shift Z. And let's scale it up about 2.5 times. And you can go back to object mode by pressing tab. Now this cube is going to create our balls for the ball pit, and so we don't really want to see it. We can make sure that it's always shown as a wire, even if we have other objects that are shaded as solids. We do that by going to the Object tab and setting the maximum draw type to wire. Now even if we add a plane with Shift A, Mesh, Plane, and scale it 8 times, you can see that this cube stays transparent. Now let's make sure that this gives off some balls. Select it by right-clicking and go to the Particles tab and give it a new particle system. We're going to call this balls. Set the start and end frames to 1 and make it emit from volume, grid. And this makes sure that they're given off in a uniform pattern. Now usually you can increase the number of particles here, but because it's a grid, you can't change it like that. You have to change it here. So let's keep it at 15. We can raise it later, but that'll increase our simulation time. So for now, we just want a quick way to get an idea of how the balls are going to move. This is a good time to save our progress. So press File, Save As, and call it something reasonable. Now select the ground, go to the physics settings and give it collision. Just increase the particle damping to 1. Now we want a box to contain these balls. So we're going to use this as our template, the cube that we created earlier, because we want it to be the same dimensions roughly. So select it by right-clicking, press Shift D to duplicate, and now you'll notice if you press G that it has the same particles as the other cube, and we don't want that. So make sure it's selected and press minus here to remove the particle system. Now we have two identical cubes, but one has this particle system in it and the other one doesn't. And this one we're going to use for the physics. Now press tab to go into edit mode, select faces down here, select the top face and grab it in the Z axis to give us a bit of room for the balls to move up. And once you're done, you can press tab to go back to object mode. we're going to give this the same physics settings as the ground. So we go to Physics tab here, select Collision, and increase the damping to 1. Now we're ready to start messing around with the physics. You might be wondering why you can't use Blender's normal particle simulation system to make this sort of simulation. And you can find out by pressing Alt-A. You can see that all the particles fall and they bounce off the ground, but they don't bounce off each other, and that's what the molecular script lets you do. We can get a better idea of what this is going to look like by going to Display and checking Size, and now we can visually see the size of these objects. Let's increase it so that they don't overlap, but so they almost take up the whole view, and we can press 3 and 5 to get a flat view from the side, and this helps us pick a good size. For now, 0.16 is going to be fine. I'm going to save again because this script is quite unstable. You want to make sure you save very frequently. So I did that by pressing Command S and clicking Save Over. Now scroll down and activate Molecular Script and activate Self Collision because we want these balls to interact with each other. Scroll down some more and you'll see these baking settings. Now we don't want it to simulate a whole 250 frames because that's a bit too long. 100 will be fine for now, and end frame has automatically been changed to 100. That's perfect. Let's just make sure that these balls live for long enough. So let's give them a long lifetime, which is going to be more than enough for our purposes. Now, to save me time when using the molecular script, I go up here to the top right corner, drag a new window down, and in this new window, I scroll all the way down to these baking options, because you're going to have to press bake, free bake a lot of times, so this saves you scrolling up and down later. Okay, the settings are pretty much done. Let's start molecular simulation to see what happens. Just one last save in case this breaks everything. You can see they're falling, they're bouncing off each other, which is exactly what we want. The only problem is you can see they're going through the ground. So there, the center of the ball isn't falling through the ground, but a lot of the ball is, and that's because we haven't activated size deflect. So free bake, tick size deflect, and start the script again. And now you can see the balls don't go through the walls, they stay exactly how you'd expect. So it looks like this is frozen, and from my experience, if the molecular script freezes like this and it doesn't fix itself within about a minute, it's probably not gonna respond again. So we're gonna have to force quit Blender and start again. So it's a good thing we saved earlier. On a Mac, you can do this with Command Alt Escape or Command Option Escape. On a Windows computer, you can press Control Alt Delete and select Blender and force quit. Now it's going to ask if you're sure, and yes, you are. So let it force quit. And let's start again. And this time, let's make sure we keep the threads to 1, because that might have been the problem. So open Blender again. Open the file that you saved earlier. Make it full screen. Now, let's make sure we have all the settings. So you want to make sure size deflect is turned on. And change the CPU, so this is the number of threads, change it to 1 if you had a problem on a Mac. Press Start Molecular Simulation, and let's hope it doesn't freeze this time. So that's finished. Let's press Alt-A to animate and see what it looks like. And you can see it looks reasonable. The balls jiggle around quite a bit after falling, so let's increase the damping settings. You can change this to about 0.5 and give it some friction as well, not as much, 0.2 should work. Now let's see what that looks like by freeing bake, saving, and starting molecular simulation. Okay, that's done. Let's animate to see what it looks like. And yeah, they sort of fall into each other. They don't bounce around. They lose some energy, and that looks more realistic. Now go to Cycles Render, and if we press Shift Z, you can just see a big cube. So let's make sure this renders properly. The first thing we want to do is make these boxes invisible. So this bigger box that we're using for collisions, select it and go to Materials, give it a new material by pressing on that number 2. Or you can do it by getting rid of the material and adding new. And we're going to call this transparent. This is going to be a completely transparent material, so we can't see it at all. So under Surface, select Transparent BSDF and make the color pure white. So you want all of these to be 1. Now if we press Shift Z to preview render, you won't see the big cube, but you'll still see this one. So let's fix that by selecting it, going to the Particle tab, and scroll up to look for your render settings, and now uncheck Emitter, and this means that the emitter isn't rendered. If we press Shift Z, you'll see that that box is also gone. Now, because the ground is in the exact same place, sometimes Blender gives you these problems where they're still rendered in a way. So a quick way to fix that is move the ground very slightly. We're going to grab it in the Z axis, 0.001. This is really just to stop that weird interaction. And that's fixed it, you can see there. Now, you'll notice that you still can't see the balls, and that's what we're going to fix now. Go to a second layer by either clicking here or pressing 2 on your number keys, not the number pad. Press Shift A to add a mesh, which is a UV sphere. And go to the object settings and add it to a group. Call this group Ball Group. Now if we duplicate this with Shift D in the Y axis, it'll make another instance of this ball, which is also in this group. And this group will help us later on when we set it to render these as the balls. Let's give ourselves 4 of these balls, which will give us 4 different colors later on. You can repeat the last command by pressing Shift R, and it'll do the same duplication as it did before, and we'll do that to give 4 balls. Now let's name them so we get less confused later on. Select the first one and call it red. Call the second one green. Call the third one blue. And we're also going to have a yellow one. And you can make these whatever colors you want, but this is what I prefer. And select them and now give them materials. So give the red one a material called red, the green one a material called green, and so on. We're not going to focus on making the material just yet. We're going to put them into the scene so that when we make the material, we can tweak it to look exactly right in the scene they're going to be in. So go back to your first layer, select your cube that gives off these balls, and go to the Particle tab. And under Render, tick Group, and this will make it use the group as the basis for making these balls. So if you click here and select Ball Group, you can see that it's filled these particles with the balls that we made. If you press Shift Z, you'll see that there are now balls where the particles are, and that's exactly what we want. You can see that as they fall, the same balls collapse into the scene. Let's save our progress. Let's set up the lighting so that we can work on the materials and we'll know exactly what they'll look like in the final scene. I'm going to get rid of this spot lamp because I don't like how it looks, and increase the ambient lighting. I'll make this pure white with 0.5 strength. If you press Shift Z, you'll see there's more ambient lighting now. Everything looks a bit brighter, a bit sharper. And press 0 on the number pad to select your camera, or if you're on a laptop, you can use View Camera. And press Shift F to move your camera to a position that you like. So I'm going to keep mine here, and if I press Shift Z, I'll see what it looks like. Now I'm wasting a lot of computer power rendering all these parts outside of the viewport, and you can fix that by going to your Render tab and checking Border, and now it only renders what the camera sees. We're ready to make these balls look realistic. Go to your second layer and press Z so you can see which ball is selected, and select any one of them and make it smooth, and make these all smooth shaded objects. Go back to the first layer by pressing 1 on the keypad and press 0 on the number pad to go to your camera view. Now we can select any one of these balls from the outliner in the top right. So I've selected blue, and if you press Shift Z to preview the render and go to the material tab, you can see that you can change the material in here and some of the balls will change color. Now we don't want a basic diffuse material, we want it to be a bit glossy like the sort of plastic that these balls are made from. So let's go to the top right here and drag down a new window and make this a node editor. And this lets us play around with the materials much more effectively. Now, this diffuse is a good start, but we want to mix it with a glossy. So press Shift A to add a new node, which is a shader, and it's going to be glossy, and we're going to mix them with a mix shader. So press Shift A to add a shader, which is mix. And now if you slot it in here, it'll connect the diffuse to the material output, and you want the glossy to connect to the second shader in the mix shader. Now let's turn this roughness down so it's shinier, and we're going to control this mixing factor with the Fresnel node. Press Shift A, input, Fresnel, and this means that how shiny the ball is depends on the angle, and that's a property that a lot of materials have, in particular plastic, and it makes it look more realistic as a plastic material. Now, it looks okay. We can zoom in with the scroll to get a better view of what these look like. It doesn't look quite right. I'm going to make this blue much more saturated. You have to make sure you're in the HSV mode to be able to play with the saturation value. Full saturation seems fine. Now, we're going to use the same basic node setup for the other balls. Press A twice to select all your nodes, Command C or Control C to copy this node setup, and now select another one of your balls. So, for example, green. Now press X to delete the existing nodes and press Command V to paste in that node setup. And now all you have to change is this color to green, and do the same thing for all your other materials. So I've selected red. I'm going to make it red. And the same for yellow. So delete the nodes, press Command V, and change its blue color to yellow. Now you can see that there's a weird sort of order in these balls, and we can fix that by selecting the cube that created them, going to the particle settings, and under render, select pick random. Now if you press Shift Z again, you can see that it's distributed much more randomly. The next thing we'll do is tweak the colors to make them a bit more realistic. And what we're going to do to help us is get some reference images of ball pits. So you can just do that in Google Images. This is good, it's a close-up. I'm going to put this on another monitor. If you don't have two screens, you can just minimize or make your window a bit smaller and have them side by side, because it really helps to be able to compare the two directly. So we're going to zoom right in so we can see what these really look like. And we're going to select one of the colors. It doesn't matter which one, let's say yellow. And the first thing I've noticed is that our reference image has this reflection in the balls, which we don't have yet, and that's because we don't have a specific light source. We're going to fix that by adding a sun lamp. So in Blender, press Z, and that helps speed up rendering. Press Shift A to add a lamp, which is a sun lamp. And now rotate it away from the camera. So go to your camera view and press R, and just rotate it slightly away. Now press Shift Z to see what that's done to our scene. You can see it's added this little speckle on the balls. Now it's a bit smaller than the speckle on my reference image. Let's fix that by making the sun lamp bigger. So with the sun lamp selected, go to your sun here and increase the size. Let's try 0.2. And yeah, that seems to have had the desired effect. Now let's play with the colors. Another thing I've noticed is that this green is a bit too bright, a bit too saturated compared to the real image I have. So I'm going to select the green ball over here and play with this color. So I can try making it darker, and that's making it look a bit better. There, looks good. And the blue isn't bright enough, so I'm going to select the blue ball on the outliner here, and I'll try increasing the value here. You can also increase the value from this, and that looks okay. The yellow also isn't quite bright enough, so I'll select that, and again just increase this value. That's a bit too much. I'll move this down and hold shift at the same time to make sure it doesn't change too much. I'll pick a value that looks about right, and that's fine as it is there. So save your progress with Command or Control Z. Let's render a frame towards the end where the balls have all collapsed onto each other. And now press Shift Z again. You can see it looks like a decent ball pit. I'm going to save again. The only problem with this scene is that it's a bit boring. The balls just sort of collapse onto each other, nothing really happens. So I'm going to make a monkey head fall into the ball pit. Press Shift A to add a mesh, which is a monkey, and grab it in the Z axis. Now the monkey is above the ball pit. We're going to give it some physics settings. So under physics on the left here, press Add Active. If you don't have this toolbar, press T to make it appear. Now go to the first frame of your animation with Shift left and press Alt A, and you can see that the monkey falls. But it doesn't affect the balls, and it falls straight through the floor. So let's fix that by giving the floor some rigid body settings as well. We're going to do that by pressing Add Passive with the floor selected. Now you can see that the monkey, if you press Alt A, it lands on the floor. That's not very clear because the balls are in the way, but if we select the monkey, you can see that it falls and it remains on top of the floor. It bounces off, and that's perfect. Now we want it to affect the Molecular Script simulation. Go to the Physics tab over here with the monkey selected. In the Physics tab, minimize all the rigid body settings because we don't need those at the moment, and press Collision. Now you want to increase the particle damping factor to 1. We're going to bake the physics settings for the monkey by going to the Scene tab, scrolling down, opening up Rigid Body Cache, and clicking Bake. Now save your progress. And we're going to change the last frame of the simulation to 250 because there's going to be more happening now and we might need those extra frames. Make sure the physics settings for the monkey are baked by going to the Scene tab, Rigid Body Cache, and pressing Bake. And now save your scene with Command S, and select the cube that gives off the balls, free the bake, and start molecular simulation. Now I've run this simulation and it looks a bit boring, so I'm going to make the monkey head bigger. Just go back to your first frame with Shift left, select the monkey, and scale it with S about 1.5 times. Now I'll rotate it in the X axis so it falls at this sort of angle. Just go back to the Scene tab and bake it again. Save your scene and select this cube, and again free the bake and start the molecular simulation again. If you see balls flying through your plane, that's because there aren't enough molecular substeps. So to fix that, just increase this to something like 16, save your scene, and start the simulation again. So you can see, even though everything is flying everywhere, nothing's fallen through the plane this time. I'm gonna get some food. Now that's finished, we're going to save again. And press Alt-A to see roughly what it looks like. So you can see the balls drop down, the monkey comes down, they all fly up. And let's see if the number of frames we have is enough. And yeah, you can see that they have time to settle back down. After about 80, 90 frames, nothing really is happening. So we're going to make it shorter again. We'll change the last frame back to 100 and save this new file. So that's it, we're almost ready to render. Let's give this monkey a better material. So if you press Shift Z, you can see it looks very boring. Let's give it a similar sort of material to these balls. So we can do that by giving it the exact same material as, let's say, the blue one. And if you press this 2, it'll give it a different copy of the same material. So now we can call this monkey. We can change this color without changing the color of the balls. So I'll make it a nice orange color like this. The background looks a bit odd. We don't want it to be floating on top of this square like it is now. Let's give it a studio style backdrop. So in your camera view, rotate the floor in the Z axis and make sure it's sort of level with the camera so that it goes away from you. And about that is fine. So you can see that it's in line, it's parallel with your view. Now, enter edit mode with tab, scale it just enough so that this corner isn't inside the camera view. And now change this selection mode to edge. Select this faraway edge and extrude it with E in the Z axis, so that extrudes it straight up. About 5 should be enough for this scene. Select this edge, press Ctrl B, and move your mouse up to give you a sort of bevel. You can scroll with the mouse wheel to give it more divisions, and we want to give this a smooth transition so that you hardly notice the background, and that should be enough. In the camera view, if you press Shift Z, you'll see that the background is much smoother now. I'll just fiddle with the camera. Now I've fiddled slightly with the camera, so I'm going to rotate the studio backdrop so that this isn't in the view. And I'll do that by pressing RZ, so rotating it in the Z axis. And to avoid this problem in the future, I'm going to enter edit mode, press A twice to select everything, and scale it, and press X. So this scales it in the local X-axis, which means it stretches it along in the direction that you want it to. And I'll scale it along about 2 times. That avoids this problem in the future. So this is ready to render. Go to the Render tab, scroll down here to Output, give it the location that you want to save in. I usually change this to JPEG because the quality difference isn't that noticeable, and it saves you a lot of space on your computer. Change this to full HD or whatever resolution you want. Click Samples here, and you might want to turn this down to save yourself some rendering time. When you're ready, press Animation. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and let me know in the comments below which other tutorials you'd like to see. I'll see you next time.